Why are global powers losing sleep over figures in simple sandals? $2,000 drones are devastating billion-dollar warships, strangling the very jugular of the global economy. Yemen is not merely a land of scarcity, it is a strategic fortress holding the world's destiny. Do you dare to understand this harsh reality? Planet Expedition is about to decode it for you right now. For decades, Yemen appeared on the world map only as a tragic example of poverty and persistent struggle. But at this very moment, this name is causing a fever across every political news outlet as it becomes a lethal coordinate in the Red Sea, directly tightening the supply chain between Asia and Europe and threatening the world's wallet, causing superpowers to lose sleep. Welcome back to Planet Expedition. We are standing before a brutal equation of asymmetric conflict, where conventional military rules are torn apart by a relentless reality. Can you believe that low-cost drones, priced at about $2,000, can force container ships worth hundreds of millions to detour around the entire continent of Africa? This detour consumes millions in extra fuel for every single vessel and sends ocean freight rates skyrocketing by 300%. The question arises, why Yemen? Why does a country with so little wealth hold the key to opening and closing a major portion of the global economy? The answer lies in the narrow gap known as Bab el-Mandeb. At its narrowest point, it is a mere 29 kilometers wide. Yet, this is the only doorway, the solitary jugular for ships from the Indian Ocean to enter the Red Sea and proceed through the Suez Canal. Every day, nearly 10% of the world's oil and 20% of global commercial goods squeeze through this passage. Simply put, if Yemen is unstable, this jugular is squeezed shut. A small group with mid-range equipment standing on the shore is enough to paralyze the vital trade artery between Asia and Europe completely. Holding the coast of Yemen means possessing the power to dictate the flow of the world. It is a massive privilege but also the pretext for great powers to never leave this land in peace. Sitting right in the heart of this strategic strait is a small, arid volcanic island called Perim. Viewed from above, it looks like a stray fragment accidentally dropped into the sea. But in military terms, whoever controls Perim holds the key to the entire sea. In the past, colonial forces turned this place into a strategic refueling station. Today, Perim is considered an unsinkable aircraft carrier. From the jagged black rocks on the island, one can observe every movement of massive oil tankers with the naked eye. No advanced radar is needed. Just a few coastal defense units tucked away in natural sea caves turn the Red Sea into a bag with no exit. The presence of any force on this island is enough to create immense political pressure on maritime powers. Here, size does not matter as much as position, and hardship does not equate to weakness. Yemen is not just a nation struggling with scarcity, it is a natural fortress challenging the order of the giants. In your opinion, where does the real power to change the world order lie? A. Money and the cutting-edge technology of superpowers. B. Strategic geographic location and the iron will of those who have nothing left to lose. Please share your answer in the comments below so we can discuss it together. When the Bab el-Mandeb jugular is tightened, the world realizes with a shock that formal military doctrines are being challenged by a force they once underestimated. There is a satirical contrast frequently appearing in international news: soldiers in plastic sandals, carrying aged rifles, yet facing off directly against multi-billion-dollar aircraft carriers. The fear of the superpowers does not stem from raw physical HOA but from a devastating concept called asymmetric engagement. To understand why this group can cause the world such a headache, we must leave the luxury boardrooms in Washington or London and travel back to their starting point, the remote Sada Mountains in northern Yemen. Sada is not a poetic plateau for tourists, it is a massive labyrinth of rubble, dust, and winds that shriek through mountain crevices with a bone-chilling cold. In Sada, nature grants nothing easily. Rare water sources lie deep beneath stone wells, and the earth is so hard that planting a simple row of vegetables requires every ounce of strength. This extreme harshness of Mother Nature has molded people with infinite endurance. Children growing up amidst the sound of struggle and scarcity have formed a force that does not fear the end, a group fighting with the pure survival instincts of mountain dwellers. For them, conflict is not a theory on paper, but a continuation of a daily, arduous life. They know every coral reef and every coastal cave, using the treacherous terrain as a shield and turning inexpensive uncrewed aerial vehicles into weapons that neutralize million-dollar defense systems. This is where all modern military theories hit a dead end. When a power attacks an industrialized nation, they strike factories, power grids, banks, or data centers to paralyze the opponent. But where do you strike in Yemen, when the people are long accustomed to living without electricity or banks, and still cook with dry wood? When an opponent has lived in absolute deprivation and has nothing left to lose, they become invisible to economic sanctions and immortal against high-altitude strikes. The stubbornness of those in sandals does not come only from hardware, but from a fierce belief rooted in the Zaydi branch, a doctrine emphasizing resistance against injustice and foreign interference. From their perspective, it is a struggle for autonomy, but through the world's lens, it is a high-stakes violent gamble. However, Yemen would never have to endure so much pain if it did not sit in such a beautiful spot on the geopolitical chessboard. The country has unintentionally become the arena for a never-ending struggle for influence between two giants of the Islamic world, Saudi Arabia and Iran. Analysts often call this a proxy conflict. One side cannot accept a government friendly to its rival right next door, directly threatening border security and vital oil arteries. Conversely, the other finds a strategic ally to extend influence all the way to the Red Sea, creating a pincer move that squeezes regional rivals. The bitter truth is that the most modern munitions are being dropped onto ancient clay houses. The people of Yemen are caught between the grand calculations of great powers, where human lives are sometimes just soulless numbers on an international negotiating table. This struggle is not just a clash between armed groups, but a collision of ideologies and the hunger for power of those behind the curtain. The fighters on the battlefield may be fighting for their ideals, but the land of Yemen is bleeding because of a game where they have no right to decide the rules. The combination of a natural fortress terrain, an indomitable spirit, and outside interference has turned this place into a quagmire with no exit, a place where the line between a freedom fighter and a disruptor becomes thinner than ever under the smoke of conflict. Yemen, in its scarcity and fire, stands as a stark reminder that spiritual strength and geographic position can overturn every calculation of those who deem themselves the strongest. Behind that smoke and those cold military calculations, a larger question remains: how can a society surrounded on all sides, a nation nearly erased from the global financial system, maintain such order and persistent survival? The answer does not lie in air-conditioned offices with modern algorithms, but in an invisible governance system operated by faith, honor, and ancient tribal conventions. In northern Yemen, the world seems to be moving backward in time to operate a social machine that does not need administrative paperwork or digital numbers. Instead of relying on a bloated civil service with tedious processes, the locals utilize mushrifs, local coordinators who act as the blood vessels connecting the authority to every household. A mushrif does not need a master's degree in public management. His ultimate standard is personal prestige, a deep understanding of morality, and absolute loyalty to the community. Here, all disputes, from dividing the boundaries of arid terrace fields to financial debts, are not resolved by lawsuits waiting for months. Instead, they are decided right under the shade of clay walls through tribal gatherings. Decisions are made based on a combination of spiritual principles and the long-standing customs of the mountain people. The strange and strongest point of this system is its harsh integrity. A mushrif's honor is tied to the fairness of his clan. If he acts wrongly or is corrupt, the price to pay is not just losing a job, but being ostracized by the entire tribe, a punishment more terrible than death for a Yemeni. In a context where the currency has lost value and central banks are divided by conflict, the people here have created a vibrant physical economy. This is a variation of the zakat obligation, but executed through survival instincts. Taxes are no longer numbers on a form, but the most practical things a family can produce. A family raising goats contributes milk and meat to support the local force or aid neighbors in distress. A family harvesting pomegranate sets aside a portion to maintain local classrooms. Those without assets contribute through sweat. They work together to dig water channels through rock walls, repair roads torn by munitions, or volunteer for local defense teams. The stability of this economy lies in the fact that it does not depend on stock markets or international exchange rates. It rests on the stomach and the self-respect of the human being. Most remarkably, in an era where all electronic data can be tracked by superpower satellites, Yemen has built an offline communication network that cannot be shut down. When the internet is severed and phone signals become targets for surveillance, information in this land still flows through the oldest paths. It is a system of oral transmission through poems and easily remembered chants at afternoon markets. The Yemeni people have a poetic soul and a rich tradition of oral literature. Now, they turn it into a potent information weapon. A strategic directive from the center can reach the most remote valley in just a few hours through a network of truck drivers and goat herders, passing info through offline messaging apps or self-made local networks within sea caves. The world looks in and sees a technological dark zone, but in reality, it is an atomized social network where the connection between people is so tight that no algorithm can penetrate. This resilience in governance and extreme self-sufficiency has turned every Yemeni village into a self-sustaining fortress, helping them stand firm amidst the storm of sanctions without needing any help from the systems of Western civilization. When invisible information networks and the spirit of self-sufficiency help the Yemeni people survive the storms of internal and external foes, it is the thousand-year-old clay architectures that stand as the most undeniable evidence of the indomitable intellect and soul of this nation. Leaving the dry rocky mountains of the north, we head south to witness an unbelievable wonder, where mud is given a soul to become giants that challenge both the sky and time. This is the Hadramaut Valley, home to Shabam, the city dubbed the Manhattan of the desert, the first and oldest complex of mud skyscrapers on the planet. In the heart of the vast desert, hundreds of high-rise buildings stand side by side, reaching up to 30 meters like a scene thought to exist only in fantasy films. But remember, when the Western world had not yet defined the concept of reinforced concrete or glass high-rises, since the 16th century, the people of Shabam mastered the technique of building apartments up to 8 stories high. Entirely from sun-dried mud bricks. This is not just a feat of construction but a song of patience. The bricks are molded from clay mixed with straw, manually pressed, and dried under the scorching sun to achieve the hardness of stone. To protect these mud fortresses from the erosion of rare but fierce rains, the wall surfaces are coated with a layer of shiny white lime, which serves as waterproofing and reflects the immense heat of the desert sun, keeping the interior spaces miraculously cool. However, do not let the poetic beauty of the red earth walls glowing under the sunset deceive you, because in reality, Shabam is a military city designed to protect human dignity against instability. The towers are built extremely close together, creating a network of shade covering narrow alleys, making the temperature in the street always dozens of degrees lower than outside. At the bottom floors, the walls are built over 1 meter thick with no windows, acting as a very solid floating foundation and a defensive shield preventing any attacks from nomadic tribes. Small windows high up are not just for the breeze but are also loopholes allowing guards to observe and counter rivals from kilometers away across the sand fields. Shabam is the evidence of a nation's intellect living in adversity. They did not build palaces to flaunt wealth, they built mud fortresses to preserve life. Not far away, the intellectual heart of the valley is named Tarim, the city of 360 ancient mosques. Here, architecture is not just stone and brick but the fossilization of faith. Amidst brutal political upheavals, the Dar al-Mustafa Institute in Tarim still stands as a magnet attracting scholars from all over the world. People come here not to pursue prestigious Western-style degrees, but to find a philosophy of life. The curriculum here is a strange blend of classical knowledge and actual survival skills, where the teacher not only teaches letters but also joins students in animal husbandry, gardening, and drinking ginger tea under clay roofs. Hidden within those thick walls is the Al-Arqaf Library, which houses over 5,000 extremely rare handwritten manuscripts on goatskin, some of which have existed for over 1,000 years. This is the intellectual genetic code of the Yemeni people, recording everything from medicine and astronomy to philosophy and poetry with a type of tree resin ink that does not fade. For the locals, these old books are more precious than any oil field or treasure of gold and silver, because they see themselves as the gatekeepers for human knowledge. Amidst the sweltering heat and the destruction of conflict, these legacies of mud and parchment still exist as an affirmation. Material things can be destroyed, but the intellect and cultural identity forged through millennia are things no power can assimilate or erase. While the thousand-year-old libraries and mud skyscrapers have carved a proud intellectual face for the interior, Yemen's nature chooses to hide its final treasures in the most remote and magical places, where the boundary between reality and myth is completely blurred. To taste the soul of this land, one must seek sidra honey, the liquid gold dubbed the most expensive on the planet. Bees are nourished by the flowers of ancient hawthorn trees in isolated valleys, where there are no footprints of chemicals or pollution. To harvest these exquisite drops, honey hunters must climb vertical cliffs with bare hands, facing danger high in the sky to bring back a refined but powerful sweetness, something considered a panacea since Roman times. That sweetness is the prelude leading guests to mandi rice, a culinary heritage meticulously roasted for hours in pits dug deep beneath the sand. Trays of spiced lamb hang suspended, letting the fat drip drop by drop onto the fragrant rice below, creating an explosion of flavor both rustic and sophisticated, where all social distances vanish as everyone gathers around a shared meal. But Yemen does not only have flavors from the earth, it also possesses aliens right on our own planet on Socotra Island. Isolated in the Indian Ocean, Socotra is like a natural museum forgotten by time, with over 30% of plant species found nowhere else. The symbol of this island is the dragon's blood tree, massive umbrellas with dense foliage rising from the dry rock. When the rough bark is lightly cut, a resin as deep red as human blood flows out, a resin once used by ancient fighters to coat wounds as a vow of immortality. Standing amidst a forest of dragon's blood trees during sunset, one easily feels lost in a prehistoric world where every ordinary biological rule is overturned. Traveling back in time to the ancient ports, the name Mocha is not merely a modern coffee flavor but an entire historical empire originating from the Al-Mocha seaport of Yemen. From the 15th to the 17th century, this was the only place in the world exporting premium Arabica beans globally. These beans, with their characteristic chocolate flavor, conquered European courts and created the culture of coffee enjoyment for humanity. Although conflict has reduced production, on the steep terraced fields in the high mountains, Yemeni farmers still quietly guard the ancient coffee trees, just as they guard the self-respect of a nation that once shaped the habits of the entire world. And deep in the Al-Mara Valley, the Barhout sinkhole, also known as the Well of Hell, still lies there as an unsolved mystery, a massive opening 30 meters wide sucking deep into the earth, where legends of spirits and shadows are still whispered among the people across generations. These treasures, from sidra liquid gold and dragon's blood trees to Mocha coffee, all crystallize into an affirmation of a mesmerizing Yemen, a country that, despite straining under hardship, still possesses natural and historical values that no superpower or wealth can buy. Looking back at the journey through the stone valleys of Sada, the mud fortresses in Shabam, to the mysterious Socotra Island, we see a Yemen that is not at all weak as the press often portrays. It is a nation of proud paradoxes, a place where extreme material lack is filled by an iron faith and a governance system based on honor. Yemen teaches us that when a people are backed into a corner, their strength does not lie in advanced hardware bought with money, but in an intimate understanding of every coral reef and every sea cave of their homeland and a cultural identity that cannot be assimilated. Those in sandals stop billion-dollar fleets not with overwhelming HOA Luke, but with the freedom of those who have nothing left to lose. Yemen is like the dragon's blood tree amidst the desert sun, the more arid, the more harsh, the inner sap becomes deeper red and more intense. This is not just a story of a hot geopolitical coordinate, but a song of survival, where ancestral wisdom and national self-respect become the sturdiest shield against every storm of the era. The greatest lesson we draw from Yemen is, position is not decided by the resources you have, but by how you optimize what you possess. In modern life, we often fall into the trap of self-doubt when we see ourselves lacking capital, connections, or technology compared to others. But remember how the Yemeni people turned treacherous terrain into an advantage and mud into a wonder. How to apply, instead of complaining about what you don't have, start by deeply understanding your own core strength, the thing that no one can take away or copy. It could be persistence, a niche skill, or the very difficult experiences you have walked through. When you know how to turn adversity into a fortress to protect and develop yourself, you will create an asymmetric power that no rival can defeat with ordinary money. In your opinion, between the modern technology and traditional values, which factor truly helps a community survive more persistently through crises? Please share your perspective in the comments so we can discuss. If you find this content useful, don't forget to hit subscribe to the Planet Expedition channel to give us more motivation to continue performing deeper and more quality journeys of discovery. Thank you for watching.